Hi guys, and happy St. Patrick's Day. So in honor of the Irish who have had to free their country from tyranny several times, we are going to start on history and the history of tyranny in Soviet Russia. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with doing a summary of Anthem chapters 1 through 8. So our story takes place in Petrograd, Russia. The Soviet Union is in control, and our main character is Kira Agronova. She has a mother and father and a younger sister, Lydia. Ayn Rand paints a sad picture of a country in tatters, torn by economic downturn and starvation. Kira came from a wealthy family that had lost all of their money in the nationalization of banks in Russia. They had fled their country for Crimea and were now returning by train, packed in very tightly. They had hoped to return to Petrograd when the White Army had defeated the Red Army. However, this was never to happen. The Red Army was in control of most of Russia for 4 years of the Agronovs being away, so they decided to return to Petrograd. The people of Petrograd bustled around the car. They talked about the rich being able to still buy in private stores, and the rest would have to wait in line at the cooperative for as long as 3 hours to get their rations. You could tell from Kira's response to the talking that she's an adventurer, a bit naive and has her head in the clouds often, a defiant girl that clearly hated the soldiers and authority. When Kira arrived in Petrograd, she found a sign immediately upon arriving, "Proletariats of the world unite," and another that said, "Long live the dictatorship of the proletariat. Who is not with us is against us." In the town, you can see soldiers yelling at people, arresting them, and a lot of starving animals and citizens. Kira entered Petrograd and tried to smile at a soldier, and this was returned with a look of indignation on his part. She did not know what she had expected. She had forgotten to help her family carry the bundles full of their remaining fortune off the train, and so she re-entered the train where her mother was fighting off soldiers trying to steal the bundles. The Argonovas take a cab home, which is really a horse-drawn carriage, and on the way they see the desolate shops and condemned buildings. The state's new economic policy has allowed some of the private stores to reopen temporarily, but they are 10 times more expensive than rationed food. The Argonovs first go to visit Galina's, the mother's sister, Marusa. She used to be rich, living in a huge house, but now there are many people in the apartment because they are forcing comrades to live together. Irina, 18, and Asiya, 8, her daughters, were also living in the huge apartment, along with many other people. We also find out that there is a son, Victor, who is busy studying at the institute. The husband, Vasily, lost his fur business in the revolution. We find out that the rich family has lost their riches and is now only able to get 2 ration cards because only students and those who worked for the new government get them. Irina and Victor are both in school, so they get ration cards. We also find out that there are many rich families that are dying from starvation and disease. It is clearly a very scary situation. The only people who aren't starving are those that are working for the government. So Marusa suggests to Galina that Alexander, her uncle, take a Soviet job. Galina is openly appalled, and Alexander says he will not do it. This pleases Vasily very much. Victor enters the picture, and he seems to have all the nice things in the world to say about the new government. He calls them progressive and states that it is a good time for new innovation. Is it? Could a red state be a good place for growth and prosperity? This is something that we're going to go over through the next month. Victor says he fears for Kira's future, and Kira tells him that that depends on what direction she wants to go. Kira is at the Russian Socialist Federal Soviet Republic's office to receive her labor book. This was considered more than a passport. It was more of a citizen's permit to live. It was to be stamped when employment was found or left, when one was married, when one got a ration card, when one was enrolled in school, or when one moved out of their apartment. She daydreamed while the officer wrote her description in his book. It is made clear in this chapter that Kira is somewhat of a defiant child, but she normally gets her way about things. She also grew up very rich. She also enjoys being alone. We break out of Kira's daydream for the official to say that she was lucky she was so young because she had so many years left to give to the toilers. A whole life of discipline, hard work, and useful labor for the great collective. It is revealed that Lydia, Kira's cousin, had fallen in love many times, but Kira had only found one man, a Viking from a book she read, to be appealing. This Viking viewed himself as a god, much like Equality did in Anthem. Kira wanted to be an engineer. She wanted to build houses of glass and steel and bridges of aluminum. She dreamed of building skyscrapers. We break out of her daydream once again for the official to say, "Toil, comrade, is the highest aim of our lives. Who does not toil does not eat." The Argonauts find an apartment and move in. It was extremely dumpy. Alexander has opened his textile store, and he is willing to accept lard for payment and trade to support his business. At night, they sat working by the candlelight instead of electricity, which no one had, much like they didn't have an anthem. But when Victor came to visit, they would use the good sugar, and they would treat him like a king, and he would bring gossip from the Soviet party. One night, Victor came to call on Kira, late, and take her for a ride around the city. He tried to kiss her, and she threw him away. She told him she would be going home alone, and he tried to follow her. And she told him that if he didn't go away, she would get the militiaman involved that she could see in the distance. He threatened to tell him that she was lying, but she approached the man. He ran off, and she instead asked for directions. She walked home alone. She turned onto a street only to hear the sound of the Song of Broken Glass, a song that sounded as if it promised hope. And that is when she saw a strange man. The attraction was immediate, and she hurried away with him into the night. He told her to ask no questions, and she replied that she had none. He had mistaken her for a prostitute, and he asked how much she would cost. Kira replied that she wouldn't be much. When they reached the abandoned garden, she asked him to take off his cap so she could see his face. He was concerned, asking her if she was sent to look for someone. Sent by whom, she asked. When he took off his cap, she was stunned by how handsome he was, and it was very visible. He called her out on it. He asked her if she had strong legs, and she said she did. He told her she should run from all the people in the city. After a long argument, and it is extremely funny, you should really read this sometime, Kira revealed that she is not a prostitute, and she simply liked his face and wanted to know him. He tells her that she is unusual, and that he is glad that he met her on this last night in the city. She's devastated that she'll never see him again. This is the first man she's ever been drawn to. They make plans to meet in a month in the same place during the day. He revealed to her that his name is Leo. Kira is so wrapped up in her new love that she forgets to get her bread ration from the institute, her school. To make matters worse, her father has not sold any textiles in his store. The family is now starving. An officer barges in and bills the broke family for the pipes. He says to have the money in by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. While Kira is in line for her bread ration the next day, she is asked to go to elections for student council by Comrade Sonia, an overly friendly woman who wouldn't take no for an answer. She doesn't think it's worth going. Kira spoke with Comrade Sobia some more. She said she would tell her how to vote and would help her vote for the Communist Party students. Kira told her that she came to the institute to learn a profession because it gave her selfish pleasure, and Comrade Sonia realized she had made a mistake. Kira decides that she will go and vote. There were many speeches in the halls and much talk from the Red Party about the internal struggle. By this, they meant the struggle to overcome the minds of the students who wanted to be free. When the speeches were done, the Reds sang Days of Our Life, an old pub song, and then the other students who still wanted liberty sang the Internationale. Kira was pleased and spoke of it to a neighbor. She was grabbed by a red gentleman who tried to scare her. She challenged him, and he eventually backed off. Kira went to visit the Dunyevs to see Irina, but it is covered in smoke. Victor comes in, greets her coldly, and complains about the smoke. He leaves, and Vasily warmly talks to Kira about how Europe is going to come and end the regime. Vasily even shows her his Tsar money he is illegally harboring. In this chapter, we also meet Vava, Victor's friend. Vava said she came to visit Irina, but she actually came for Victor, and everyone knows it. She also brought face powder or concealer from abroad. It was smuggled in as payment to her father, and she was also promised lipstick. This was amazing because no one could get anything from abroad because of the lack of trade agreements. In the morning, on the way to the institute, the GPU that threatened her during the elections helped Kira cross the ice. It is the day that she is supposed to meet Leo. Leo tells her that she is living with an old nurse and she mended his coat. Kira tells him about her dreams to become an engineer. Leo asks Kira what she would like in return from society for her skyscraper. She says admiration. Leo says, I'm too conceited to want admiration. But if you want it, who can give it to you? Who is capable of it? Who can still want to be capable? It is a curse, you know, to be able to look higher than you are allowed to reach. One is safer looking down. The further down, the safer these days. They parted, and Leo said he would see her in another month. He kissed her hand and went to the train. The next day, Kira goes to buy a suitcase with the cab fare she's been saving that her father has been giving her on days that the store does well. She runs into Vasily selling a porcelain clock. Vasily wanted to sell the clock and bragged about his children to Kira in the most polite way. Kira then helped him haggle a stranger to buy the clock. On the way back, Vasily bought a newspaper from an officer of the Imperial Army and tipped him, only to say he will still be in his debt. The next day, at the institute, the GPU runs into Kira again. He actually enters the wrong classroom, but when he sees Kira, he stays. She teases him about his presence, and they run into Comrade Sonia. She makes fun of Kira for spending time with a communist, who we finally found out is Comrade Toganov, and he escorts Kira home. And so now I'm going to read you a little bit of the book because I really don't think that I can do justice this conversation that Kira and Comrade Toganov have. So I'm going to go ahead and read the book to you. Outside, snow melted into mud under many hurried steps, and the mud froze into sharp, jagged ridges. He took Kira's arm. He looked at her with a silent inquiry for approval. She answered by closing her eyes and nodding. They walked silently. Then she looked up at him and smiled. She said, I thought that communists never did anything except what they wanted to do, that they never believed in doing anything but what they had to do. That's strange, he smiled. I must be a very poor communist. I've always done only what I wanted to do. Your revolutionary duty? There is no such thing as duty. If you know that a thing is right, you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, it isn't right. If it's right and you don't want to do it, you don't know what right is, and you're not a man. Haven't you ever wanted a thing for no reason save one, that you wanted it? Certainly, that's always been my only reason. I've never wanted things unless they could help my cause. For you see, it is my cause. And your cause is to deny yourself for the sake of millions? No, to bring the millions up to where I want them, for my sake. And when you think you're right, you do it at any price? I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, as so many of our enemies do, that you admire our ideals but loathe our methods. I loathe your ideals. Why? For one reason, mainly, chiefly, and eternally. No matter how much your party promises to accomplish, no matter what paradise it plans to bring mankind, whatever your other claims may be, there is one you can't avoid, one that will turn your paradise into the most unspeakable hell, your claim that man must live for the state. What better purpose can he live for? Don't you know? Her voice trembled suddenly in a passionate plea she could not hide. Don't you know that there are things in the best of us which no outside hand should dare to touch? Things sacred because, and only because, one can say, this is mine. Don't you know that we live only for ourselves? The best of us do. Those who are worthy of it. Don't you know that there is something in us which must not be touched by any state, by any collective, by any number of millions? He answered, no. Comrade Toganov, she whispered. How much have you to learn? He looked down at her with his quiet shadow of a smile and patted her head like a child's. Don't you know, he asked, that we can't sacrifice millions for the sake of the few? Can you sacrifice the few? When those few are the best, deny the best its rights to the top, and you have no best left. What are your masses but millions of dull, shriveled, stagnant souls that have no thoughts of their own, no dreams of their own, no will of their own, who eat and sleep and chew helplessly the words others put into their brains? And for those who would sacrifice the few, who know life, who are life, I loathe your ideals because I know no worse injustice than the giving of the undeserved, because men are not equal in ability, and one can't treat them as if they were, and because I loathe most of them. I'm glad, so do I. But then, only I don't enjoy the luxury of loathing. I'd rather try to make them worth looking at, to bring them up to my level, and you make a great little fighter on our side. I think you know I could never be that. I think I do. But why don't you fight against us then? Because I have less in common with you than the enemies who fight you have. I don't want to fight for the people. I don't want to fight against the people. I don't want to hear of the people. I want to be left alone, to live. Isn't this a strange request? Is it? And what is the state but a servant and a convenience for the large number of people, just like the electric light and the plumbing system? And wouldn't it be prosperous to claim that men must exist for their plumbing, not the plumbing for the men? And if your plumbing pipes got badly out of order, wouldn't it be preposterous to sit still and not make an effort to mend them? I wish you luck, Comrade Toganov. I hope that when you find those pipes running red with your own blood, you'll still think that they're worth mending. I think this conversation is extremely telling. It tells a lot about Kira's ideals, and it's important that we take note of these ideals. After their conversation, Andrei Toganov invites Kira to the theater, and she graciously accepts. Alexander's textile business fails, and he is forced to spend the last of his savings on taxes, so Alexander goes into a soap partnership with an old bookkeeper friend. The next day at school, Kira asks Comrade Sonia about Andrei, and she implies that she slept with him. Kira is visibly taken aback. Andrei finds her later that day and invites her to the theater that night. He will call on her at her house. Kira came home, and her family hemmed a dress for her. Then she announced that she was going out with a communist. The family was very upset. Only Galina was polite to him when he showed up. At the theater, it was very apparent that wealth has simply changed hands. The wives of the communists are nicely dressed, probably stolen clothes. They watched the opera, and Kira enjoyed it, but Andrei found it to be a frivolous waste of time to enjoy something simply because it was beautiful. The next day, Leo came and found her outside of the institute. He whisked her away and told her that he had tried to stay away, but he loved her. He said he would come again tomorrow, but she told him to wait a week. Turns out that she was right, because the next day she was asked to the communist cell for questioning. She was questioned by Comrade Sayrov, until Andrei comes in and puts an end to it. He dismisses her and tells her that they will let her know if they need her again. Andrei made it clear to Sayrov that he was not to question Kira again. We also learned about Andrei's past. His father was a communist who left him very young. His mother died at 12, and he went to work in a factory. We found out that Sayrov and he didn't get along growing up. It turned out that Andrei also peddled communist pamphlets before it was even popular. When Sayrov lost his job at the haberdashery, he went to work at the factory as well and started haughtily handing out communist pamphlets too. Andrei fought in the war. Sayrov did not, but he was always ready to haughtily claim credit. We are painted a picture of Andrei that he is compassionate as well as passionate for the cause. The chapter closes with the red communist flag hanging high over the village because the Reds had just won the war. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you really enjoyed this. Below you can check out links to my Facebook, Twitter, and blog so you can hear even more from me. You can also check out a link to my song Shug. There's also a link to join the Free State Project. If you haven't signed up to make the move, please do, because you can come out here and hang out with cool people and learn about liberty and enjoy yourself. We have really cool classes around here. We do things like hydroponics and Church with a Sword, and it's absolutely fascinating. If you haven't checked it out, you absolutely should. Get in touch with me if you have any questions about moving to the Free State Project. Remember guys, knowledge is not for all men, but for those who seek it. So keep seeking.